The color of an 1800-degree fire is not evidenced with thick, dark, black smoke, which suggests that the fire was indeed oxygen-starved and on its way out, particularly in the South Tower, where the flames were dying down when Chief Oriel Palmer suggested that we have that we have isolated pockets of fire, 2 of them, that could easily be put out by 2 lines that they could bring up.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. And now let's allow Richard Gage to make his initial 10-minute opening statement.
Good evening. After careful examination of the official explanation of the destruction of the 3 World Trade Center skyscrapers, along with eyewitness testimony and forensic data that was omitted from the official reports, the 1,450 architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth, along with professionals and citizens in the 9/11 Truth movement, have concluded that a new independent investigation into these catastrophic events is both necessary and essential to the very preservation of our democracy. The information assembled by us does not come out of the blue. Millions across our country have joined the 9/11 Truth movement to expose this evidence to the American people and to seek justice. Why? Well, let's start with the 9/11 Commission. Composed mostly of lawyers and politicians, no engineers, who said, among other things, we were set up to fail. It's not to be considered the last word on the attacks, but only a beginning, the report that they issued. And it didn't even include World Trade Center 7's destruction, the 3rd worst structural failure in modern history. Tim Romer on the commission says, we were extremely frustrated with the false statements we were getting. Max Cleland, this investigation is now compromised, he stated before he resigned in disgust. It's a national scandal. America is being cheated. The White House wants to cover it up. And John Farmer, senior counsel for the 9/11 Commission, states, I was shocked at how different the truth was from the way it was described. The tapes told a radically different story from what has been told to us and the public. He says there was an agreement not to tell the truth. Speaking of not telling the truth, let's move on to NIST, the National Institute for Standards and Technology, the government agency that is part of the U.S. Department of Commerce under the Bush administration. Though NIST was tasked with analyzing and explaining the 3 worst and most unexpected catastrophic failures in modern history, the Bush administration allocated far less resources for the task than was used to investigate Bill Clinton's affair with Monica Lewinsky. In their 10,000-page report, NIST could easily have, but explicitly avoided, analyzing the behavior of the Twin Towers after the point at which the collapses began. The focus of the 3-year, $20 million study was on how each tower became poised for collapse by the damage caused by the jetliner impacts and the resulting fires, on the a priori assumption that those were the causes of those collapse. No other hypothesis for what brought down the skyscrapers was discussed in the report, even though all of the evidence you're about to see tonight was available to them. This is not science. This is a cover-up. Tonight, you're likely to hear many of the typical fancy explanations, rationalizations, hand-waving, appeals to authority, and false syllogisms and other logical fallacies that are commonly heard from the defenders of the official accounts of these events. But there are numerous physical impossibilities in these reports in themselves. If any one of them remains unresolved after tonight, the debate is over. And my opponent should be compelled to join us and millions of others across the country in demanding a new investigation. Here are just a few of those physical impossibilities. My opponent must resolve the symmetrical, free-fall collapse of the World Trade Center Building 7 without the use of explosives, or the debate is over. The melting of steel girders, documented by structural engineers and FEMA, or the debate is over. The documented finding of several tons of molten steel or iron in the debris pile of all 3 buildings without the use of incendiaries, or the debate is over. The billions of previously molten iron microspheres discovered by the USGS in the World Trade Center dust without the use of incendiaries, or the debate is over. The red-gray chips of advanced energetic nanothermite composite materials found in the World Trade Center dust, or the debate is over. What my opponent thinks, understands, believes, what might have happened is of no consequence unless it is proven. Listen tonight for the easy explanations for the tower's natural collapse from the defenders of the official account. In fact, if the easy explanations for the Twin Towers' demise was so easy, then why did NIST not even provide an analysis of that collapse? They simply speculate about the collapse in a mere one-half-page statement. The structure below the level of collapse initiation offered minimal resistance. The large building mass far exceeded the capacity of the intact structure below to absorb that. It came down in essentially free fall speed. One-half page. And why have we received written support from the FBI upon a written request to investigate these three collapses? The FBI's Assistant Director for Counterterrorism, Michael Heimbach, writes, Mr. Gage presents an interesting theory backed by thorough research and analysis. Could it be because we, unlike NIST, apply the time-honored scientific method, which many of us learned in the 7th or 8th grade, being the best way yet for winnowing error from truth? It starts with honest background research, like the structure of the World Trade Center towers, which, far from being weak and cheap, was robustly designed 5 times its required capacity to hold up the loads. Per NIST, it was a very redundant, robust structure. It performed its job when the plane impacts hit. They merely speculate that it succumbed to the fires. NIST, it's composed of 47 massive core columns arranged around the elevator shafts and surrounded by 14-inch box columns at 3 feet 9 inches on center. Extremely robust structure. There's more steel on the exterior than there is window space. Let's take a look. NIST claims that the upper block of each of the Twin Towers crushed the lower block, but video analysis reveals clearly that the upper block was fragmented in waves of explosions prior to the crushing of the lower block. Furthermore, the lighter, less strong upper block could not have destroyed the heavier, much stronger lower block, even if the upper block had remained in one piece. NIST didn't even conduct simple calculations or experiments to substantiate their column failure theory of crush down, crush up, which ignores the uniform downward near free-fall acceleration observed in the videos. Why did NIST have to falsify, for instance, the computer model with an artificial 5,000-pound lateral load on each perimeter column in order to justify the observed inward bowing phenomena which is alleged to have started the structural failure? The inward bowing at the onset of destruction couldn't have been caused by the minimal additional horizontal loads allegedly applied from these sagging floor trusses. Were they instead caused by the explosive sabotage of the core columns, acknowledged by NIST to have failed slightly ahead of the perimeter columns? Did the core columns then pull in the trusses, and which in turn pulled in the perimeter columns with the much greater available forces? We believe that there's ample evidence to back up the hypothesis of the explosive controlled demolition of the Twin Towers. My opponent and I have radically different perspectives on the same body of evidence. We request your patient attention, critical thinking, and follow-up research of your own in order to find your own personal conclusions.
Richard, you have another 1 minute and 29 seconds if you wish to take it.
I yield my time.
Okay. Unlike Congress, however, you're not going to get it back later.
Oh.
Now then, if we could reset the timer to the 2 minutes. We're going to allow Mr. Chris Mohr to now rebut Richard's opening remarks for 2 minutes.
And thank you. I do have a little slide for this as well. First of all, Richard is a master of rhetoric, but I promise you that this debate, I'm going to slug it out all the way to the end. The debate is not over if you're not satisfied with all my answers. It's true that NIST didn't talk about the collapse itself, and I promise you we will talk about why. They gave me some interesting answers on the telephone of that. Richard, in his Blueprint for Truth video, always talks about the many ways that this is so much like controlled demolition, that these collapses that we see. In 100 other ways, I think it's completely different. By definition, a controlled demolition, you have control of all the variables, and everybody who's in the controlled demolition field says the same thing. We have variables like plane crashes, 30,000 plus workers watching the holes being drilled into their office walls, paranoid people who were part of that 1993 terrorist attack and were victims of that in one way or another, hearing tapping sounds, strong smells of welding torches for controlled demolition preparation, major fires with huge collapses, local collapses all over the place. I did not find one worker who reported that kind of suspicious preparation activity, and not one controlled demolition firm has said it would be possible to carry out a controlled demolition with these incredible variables that are happening. Even former controlled demolition employee Tom Sullivan, a rare person in the business who does believe this was a controlled demolition, told me, quote, "Not getting this critical timing right results in a hung structure, meaning floors and entire sections not to collapse but rather pile up. It is very hard indeed to get these buildings down in a controlled manner under the best of circumstances when everything is studied and indeed controlled."
One of the ways you could repeat the destruction of the towers every time is to take down the core columns, the outer core columns, the ones on the inside, and cut the corners of the perimeter. And then the perimeters are just going to pedal out. Well, if you look at the debris map, that's exactly what happened. If you cut the corners, you just have a flat sheet. It loses its orthogonal support.
Well, I'd like to compare for you. Oh my gosh, I'm out of time. This is the rumbling collapse of what we heard on the collapse of the towers. Do we have the sound?
All right, Mr. Mohr, time's up.
I'll give you the comparison later.
Okay. We're going to proceed now to a series of questions to each of our debaters. You should know that the order in which we're going to ask the questions has been agreed to in advance by the two of them. We'll first start off with a question addressed to Mr. Chris Mohr, and it deals with the history of fires in high-rise buildings. Mr. Mohr, there has never been a steel frame high-rise collapse from fire in history, yet we are told it happened 3 times on September 11th. Isn't this really evidence of controlled demolition?
It's an excellent question, and actually it's one of the few things that NIST and I and Richard Gage agree on. NIST itself says there is no history of destruction by fire in steel frame high-rises. And I apologize, but I just have to play this one video here. Oh, please come back. Let's see. This is a video. You can hear the sounds of the controlled demolition. This is a real controlled demolition. Squids going up and down. Lots of noise. Squids in a nice orderly pattern. Collapse on the bottom and then moving its way up. And so that's something that I wanted to be sure you saw. There have been steel frame structures that have collapsed in controlled demolition. Oh, come back. Okay. So there are many different places where we have seen the collapse of steel structures. The Sound Theater in Pennsylvania, the McCormick Center in Chicago, the Cadell Toy Factory in Singapore, the Mumbai High North Oil Platform, the Interstate 580 overpass near San Francisco. World Trade Center 5 even had a partial collapse of 4 floors as well. And we can see that a little bit here. I don't know if nanothermites were just used on those 4 floors or if they were, or, what was going on. Maybe they had a little bit left over there. People have been surprised by the collapse of steel frame buildings since 1900. Back in the days of the unsinkable ship Titanic, they thought that they had indestructible buildings that were falling down back in those days.